Okay, welcome to another Walk and Talk. This episode is going to be about how listening to music is actually the best form of music education. A lot of times we want to learn about music, learn about the chords and stuff, and without this we're not really going to know what we're listening to. But when we already know the fundamentals, we know the time, the tempo, and the what they call the time signature, how many beats are going to fit in a measure, all these little things. Then when we actually want to kind of further our development as a musician, I think the best way is literally listening to music. If you want to take it a step further, playing music would even be better. But you can't be playing music, everywhere you go and everything you do. And we basically live in a day and age where we can listen to music anywhere we go and doing everything we do. Okay, so there's a lot of music out there. There's the whole, there's music all the way back from 1600s. We have the Renaissance period. We have the Baroque period. We have the classical, romantic classical, late romantic classical, early contemporary, serialistic, getting into jazz, bebop, jazz, blues, classic rock, going more into stemming from blues rock into hard rock, getting into metal, heavy metal. There's so much music. Okay, so the whole point is there's a lot of music to listen to. There's so many genres you can kind of pick and choose. Or if you're like me and you think, oh my gosh, any genre of music can be good, the person makes it good, then there's a whole plethora of music learning opportunities for you. So that kind of goes back to the fact that you do have to know the basics. You have to know how to count music, which is really a convenient thing. When you hear the music playing, you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can follow the beat, and you can tell when they're highlighting the beat, when they're playing the beat, when they're going outside the beat. Maybe they're doing what they call syncopation and doing things that are offbeat, and it makes it part of the song, it makes it part of the groove. So of course you got to learn all the fundamentals, and I guess that brings into a topic. I heard something. That brings up the topic of what are the fundamentals that you need to learn to listen to music. And I think you could boil a lot of this down by training your ears. So you're training your ears in multiple ways. You have to train your ears for the rhythm. You have to train your ears for knowing chords and scales. And with this, you'll be able to identify chord changes, and you'll be able to understand when the melody's playing what chords it's highlighting. Without the fundamental understanding of all this, you're not really going to understand what you're hearing. But after you learn all the basics, all you got to do is sit back, listen to music all day, and it's a learning lesson. It's a masterclass in every song, in every symphony, in every concert, in every album. You can learn so much. So this kind of goes along with the idea of making learning more enjoyable, actually enjoying learning and making it a process that you look forward to instead of something you dread. And to get there, you might have to pay your dues a bit, sit down, and actually study some of this stuff. Like I'm saying, if you just try to listen to music and figure it out, you're probably not really going to know what you're listening to. But if you spend a solid amount of time understanding the basic music theory, you don't need to take it too far, you'll have the tools to be able to train your ear. And training your ear is not just listening to music, and it's not just learning about what they call the music theory or the complexities of music, but it actually has to do with combining these two things together. So you're listening to music, but you actually can comprehend that when there's a melody playing, like I was saying, it's highlighting maybe a chord, maybe two different chords. Maybe it's highlighting two chords for the main part of it, and there's some ambiguity of a third chord in the middle of it with some of the passing notes that they're doing. So when you understand some of this stuff, it makes music a lot less foreign, and it's of course good to be able to ask someone questions, but sometimes you don't know the questions to ask. So this is just kind of a big thing you have to tackle as a musician if you want to be able to listen to music and comprehend what you're listening to. I'll kind of give you a list of some of the things you're going to need to study. I would first study the major scale and understand keys that are in the major scale. You need to understand the intervals in the major scale from the root note, how you have your perfect fifth from your root note. And then, you can take this a step further and understand other things like the tritone relationship and the major scale. So then also with the major scale, you need to understand the spacing of it, that it has a pattern of whole steps and half steps. And you have your whole, half, whole, half. That's the pattern of a major scale. These little things are kind of the beginner training wheels approach, but it's really good to, when you're beginning all this, to understand this stuff. So when you're doing the major scale, I recommend starting with C major, no flats and no sharps. And you're not just going to understand this, but you're going to stay here for a while. You're going to write a lot of music in C major. You're going to think about a lot of things in C major. When you're thinking about the major scale and you start learning about the major scale and the different chords and stuff, just stay in C major in the beginning, because once you really know C major, your F and G are your 5, your 4 and 5, little things like this. Then you can translate this to other keys and you can understand, okay, it's all interval relationships. It all is basically a different scale that has all the same spacings as a different scale, but it's starting from a different root note. It might be a little complex if you don't understand this stuff, but there will be a day where all that will make sense. And basically, you got to stay on the major scale for a while. You got to become really good friends with it, really understand it. And then once you finally understand the major scale, C major, then you can look at other major scales. You can look at G major, D major, A major, E major. You start to go up to the keys that have sharps. A really good way to understand my shoelaces got. A really good way to understand your keys is to study something called the circle of fifths. This is represented in a picture where there's a circle and it has all of your major keys going around it in a circle. And once you understand how to read this, then it opens up all keys basically. There's also minor keys on here, which is what I'll go to next. But while you're staying in major keys and you're looking at the circle of fifths, all you need to know is your circle of flats and your circle of sharps, or in other words, they're called the order of flats, the order of sharps. I have a whole video about this. It's like Music Monday, creating the circle of fifths or something. And that is a very helpful video because I show you how to make the circle of fifths yourself. When you make something yourself, you really understand it. You won't forget it. You can not only draw anywhere, if you're a visual thinker, you can comprehend this all in your head. And then you can have all of the musical scales and keys and everything else all in your head without looking at any piece of paper. So then after getting to know the major scales and now looking at the circle of fifths, you need to look at minor scales. And the first one you look at is A minor, just in the natural minor form. There's variations of the minor scale, harmonic minor, melodic minor, but you don't really need to get into all that until you really understand the minor scale, how to write for the minor scale, and you just do a real training wheel approach. So you need to learn the major scale, the minor scale. It'd also be good to know about the chromatic scale, which is just all of the 12 notes in the music scale. And knowing the chromatic scale with flats and sharps is very convenient. To sum it up, all of your notes when you're thinking about sharps have sharps besides B and E. And when you're thinking about flats, all of your notes have flats except for C and F. So once you understand these things, you can start connecting a bunch of dots and music can actually make sense to you. It's basically another language that you have to understand. And once you understand those basic things with the major scale, the minor scale, the chromatic scale, and you start to actually learn about key relationships, you have most of it right there. The other thing you need to learn about is intervals and semitones correlating with intervals. How if you start with one semitone, you have a minor second, 2 is a major second, 3 is a minor third, and so on. And you can learn all this. I mean, I guess I'll just say more. If you have 4 semitones, you have a major third. If you have 5 semitones, you have a perfect fourth. If you have 6 semitones, that's exactly halfway in between the 12. And you have a augmented fourth or a diminished fifth, which is also known as a tritone. because it's 3 whole tones put together. If you go to 7 semitones, you have a perfect fifth. 8 semitones, you have a minor sixth. 9 semitones, you have a major sixth. 10 semitones, you have a minor seventh. 11 semitones, you have a major seventh. And then at 12 semitones, you have the perfect octave. So there you go. You don't even need to watch a whole nother video about it, but you need to know your intervals. You need to correlate this with the notes you're playing, understand how to see intervals in their major, minor, augmented, and diminished state just by looking at a pair of 2 notes. It really is not that difficult once you understand the whole thing of B and E only having sharps. And I like to think about that when I'm going up. When you're going down, you can think about how C and F only have flats. Again, this might be kind of over your head, but it's good food for thought. Once you know your intervals, then you can take it a step further and combine some of these intervals to create chords. In the beginning, you learn something called triads. These are chords that are built from a root note, and in the root position, you go up to a 1, a third, and a 5 from the root note. Or in other words, you take the root note, you stack a third on top of that, and from where the next third is, you stack another third on top of that. So if you have C, go up an E. From C, you go up to G, 1, 3, 5. Or you go from C to E, third, and then from E to G, another third. Once you understand these basic things, you can then look at the note and you can tell if there is how many semitones in between each of those notes by understanding that B and E only have sharps. It's just some food for thought there. Just a little tip for you to help you out. And then once you learn about triads, then you could learn about the inversions, but I would recommend first learning about 7th chords and at least just learning what 7th chords are. If you learn about the circle of thirds, it's really easy. So circle of thirds, you can memorize with a saying called, every good band deserves fans and cash. And then it repeats. So you have E, G, B, D, F, A, C, and then it goes back to E. So those are all of the thirds that you can create. So if you start from a B, you say B, D, F, you just created a B chord in root position. Things get a little complicated when you invert things. So that's where then, after learning what a 7th chord is, you learn that that is just adding one more of those thirds. So again, B, B, D, F, A. Now that you have those 4 notes, you have a 7th chord in root position. Now you can learn what happens when you scramble the chords up, because you don't only want to play in root position when you're making music. You want to be able to have the notes from the chord in different orders. It adds cool effects, it makes it more interesting. So then you learn about triad inversions and you learn about 7th chord inversions. It's quite comprehensive, all the stuff I'm explaining here. So I will actually have videos linked down below for all this stuff. So that's basically all I think you need to know to train your ears. If you want to take it a step further, just be aware that people can change keys. It's called modulation. If you just understand the fact that keys can change and you start to be able to hear the key, and when a key changes, it's basically all you need to do. You can learn about all the more complex stuff you want, but you basically just need to know the stuff that I explained right there. I guess some other things to understand, some good things would be transposition and also the intervals of semitones. So first off, when you're transposing, what this word means is that, let's say you're taking a melody in C major and you take that same melody, now you put it in F major. So if the melody started from C, now it's the same melody where everything is the same distance and intervals apart. That's why it's good to know all these things. They're the same intervals apart, but it's now in a different key. Then the other good thing to know would be semitone inversions, that when you know your intervals and you know what semitones they are, then you can look at an inversion of any interval and know not only how many semitones it is, but also what state it's in. So if, let's say you have a C to an E, you know that that's going to be 4 semitones away if you understand your notes and your intervals. And then if I wanted to then invert that to an E to G, now I know that that's not only going to be a 6th, because I know the intervals, I know how intervals invert, a third becomes a 6th, but now I know that because it was a major third, it becomes a minor 6th. Then you can also think about the rule where if you have an interval, you had 4 semitones in the major third, then when you invert it, you're going to subtract 12, so 12 minus 4, and you're going to get 8. So now you have 8 semitones, and what do you know? You have your minor sixth right there. I already did mention this, and another thing to know that would be good is modulations. Things can change to different keys. Oftentimes there's something called a pivot chord. That's the very basic use of modulation, where you have one chord that exists in 2 different keys, and basically you're in the first key, you use that chord, and then you use that chord to then bring you 2 different chords that are in the second key, since it's the same chord in 2 different keys. It's called a pivot chord. Some of these things are easier just to learn about than to explain on a video, but all these things go into the idea of studying these things and then training your ear to be able to hear these things, so you can go out and you can just listen to music, you can listen to albums, you can listen to anything and go out and you can start to comprehend how to make your favorite music, or just what makes up certain genres and makes music sound the way that it sounds. So I'm going to wrap this all up because it doesn't really need to be that long. There's not a whole lot to explain here. I just wanted to give some more tips. And the last tip I'm going to give is to do audiation, which is being able to read something and sing it out loud. That's what a lot of people think, but you could also use it where you hear something and then you're going to do it back. You're going to echo what you just heard. This is one of the most useful tools for learning about music because you can really internalize it and you can repeat what you just heard. Then from here, you're actually training your ear with your voice. Your voice is, I think, the closest instrument to your body because you're not really doing anything special. You're just using your vocal cords. Once you use an instrument outside your body, like a piano, there's an extra step. So I think once you're able to audiate certain things, hear something and sing it out loud, or even read something and sing it out loud, this is only going to benefit you than if you go on an instrument and you try to play the instrument, because you're going to have an ear that's a lot more trained and can hear a lot more. So that's basically how I'm going to wrap this up. There's not a whole lot more to say, but basically you need to train your ear while listening to music if you want anytime you listen to music to be like a learning experience. But in order to do that, you are going to need to learn some of the music theory stuff, some of the very basics. So, gonna have to bite the bullet a bit, sit down, learn some of that stuff, and then you'll be able to go and learn about music anywhere you are, anytime, because you can put your headphones in, listen to music, you can hum songs that you know of, you can take this anywhere you want. So good luck with that, and this is the end of the video. Take care and goodbye. Okay, psych. I thought it was the end of the video. It's not, though. I have to explain something really important, and that's that when you're doing all of this, you're learning, training your ear, trying to actually comprehend what you're listening to. You don't need to comprehend it exactly to where you hear a melody and you go, oh yes, that was a major C chord and it blah 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 blah. It's not like that. You could take it to that level and that would be great, but what you really need to do is just comprehend what I just said, that basically music is made with chords, it uses melody, bass lines, and it's in a certain key. When you're able to hear these things and you're able just to hear that it is playing certain chords, that's all you basically need to do to understand music and to be able to learn from it. You could take it a step further and really train your ear to understand exactly what you're listening to. But what I really meant in this video is that when you're learning all these things and you're applying it to your ear when you're listening, that you're just going to be able to understand music more. You don't have to know exactly what you're hearing, but it's just the fact that you're hearing a comprehension of one chord. It sounds like going to another chord. It kind of sounds different now. It sounds like maybe it went to a different key. Okay, now the melody changed and the rhythm's changing when it's going to a different section of the song. These little things you're probably not going to interpret and comprehend in the beginning when you don't know about these things. So you just need to understand kind of what's happening in the song, get a grasp of it, but you don't need to understand exactly what's happening. So I kind of realized that I made it seem like you need to train your ear to understand exactly what you're hearing with the intervals and stuff. But what I really meant is you just need to understand all these things exist, so you understand that is what's happening on in the music, and it doesn't look so foggy anymore, and you can actually clear it up. Then now, because you know the song is made of chords and the rhythm changed, blah blah blah, you can go back, you can dissect it, you can sit down on a piano, You can try to play the notes you thought it was, make it sound right, you know, think about the rhythm, start to count, and realize how the rhythm changed, what it was highlighting, what changed in that. So yeah, it's a lot easier than you think, and there's steps to this. So don't expect to be able to do this overnight. It takes a little while, and at least remember to enjoy the process. Have fun with this, okay? So that's all.